Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 8 of the Human Classroom. This episode is a fun one, okay? If you've ever spent any time around young children, you've probably heard the question that every adult eventually learns to anticipate. But why? Why do I have to raise my hand? Why do I have to sit here? Why can't I wear my hat inside? Why do we even have homework? Why do we walk in a line? And if I'm being completely honest, sometimes I've answered those questions with, because that's just how we do it, or even the favorite mom answer of, because I said so. Not because I don't value curiosity, but sometimes teaching is exhausting. Sometimes there are 18 little humans asking 18 different questions while you're trying to get everyone safely from one place to another. But today, and only today, no other days. I'm kidding. But today, I want us to stop and ask that question anyway. Why do we walk in a line? This is about the hidden lessons schools teach us, okay? Because I don't think the answer is nearly as simple as we make it, right? One of my favorite ideas in education, well, I don't know if it's my favorite. It's definitely a recurring idea that I keep coming back and forth to. It's kind of a love-hate relationship at this point because there are a lot of different things with it, but it's called hidden curriculum. Schools technically teach 2 curricula every day, okay? There's that official curriculum, the reading, the math, the science, the written lesson plans, everything that we turn into our superiors to make sure that everything flows great and we're checking all the boxes. But then there's the curriculum happening all the time, the invisible one. It's teaching children how to do the things like wait their turn, raise their hand, stand in a line, ask permission, transition safely between activities, meet deadlines, share space, work together, solve conflict. Ugh, these all sound kind of gross when you list them off by themselves. And none of those are listed in the standards of teaching, so to speak. And children are expected to practice them every day. And the question isn't whether schools are teaching these lessons, because we actually absolutely do and are. It does sound a little cringy when you list them like that. It does sound like a complete and total control tactic and compliance fest. But the question becomes, are we teaching these things with intentionality? Let's actually answer it, okay? Really, let's answer the question. Why do we walk in a line? Because yes, after that laundry list of things, when you hear it, people immediately think control. It's about control. We need people to behave and be mindless little control stamps that we've just cranked out like little robots. But that is so far distilled from, like, it's too simple, okay? The lines exist because communities function better when people understand how to move together. Yes, tell that to a 3 or 5-year-old. Not exactly the easiest, but they're about safety, organization, accountability, predictability, and shared spaces. Let me say that again. Shared spaces. If you've ever watched 20 preschoolers decide they want to reach the playground at the exact same moment, you then understand why a line exists. But when you explain to them, the hallway belongs to everyone, we have to make space. Other classes are learning. Someone may be sleeping. I need to count my students so that I know that everyone has gotten here safely and nobody's missing. Explaining these to my students is not just because they're arbitrary expectations. They serve a very real purpose. These are acts of caring for a community. And this is where it gets interesting, okay? The human classroom question isn't, are lines good or bad? It's more like this. When does the tool become the goal? Because walking in a line isn't the lesson. The lesson is learning how individual people become part of a community. The danger, though, comes when we stop explaining the purpose and start demanding compliance simply because expecting compliance is easier. When the behavior becomes the lesson instead of the values behind it, we've lost something very important. We are not raising children to stop thinking, and I want to be very clear. It is not about raising children who simply follow directions. It is trying to help raise adults who know how to think. Adults who understand why communities create expectations. Adults who know when a rule serves a purpose and when it deserves a question, and when it is their responsibility to help create something better in its place. Because that is not rebellion, that is discernment. Because there is a difference between blind compliance and thoughtful consideration. Think about standing in a line at a grocery store, okay? This is, when we're going back to this compliance or consideration thing. Most of us become frustrated when someone simply cuts in front of us in the line, right? Why? Not because this line is this sacred thing, but fairness matters, respect matters, shared space matters again. But imagine somebody walks up to you and says, I apologize, my son is having a really hard time. You see a crying child attached to them, and they're like, would you mind if I step ahead to check out with this water really quick so that he can just have a drink? He's just having a moment. Whether you believe or agree or disagree with the way this person is parenting is besides the point. The difference is that this person is not ignoring community, they're engaging with it. They're recognizing that other people are affected by their actions, and they're asking instead of assuming. That is not compliance. That is not cowering or making themselves smaller. It's being considerate. That's empathy, and it's part of being in a community. Those are the values that I hope the schools are teaching instead of just stand in a line. One of my favorite discoveries of standing in a line while teaching preschool completely turned how I think about routines or answering the but why questions on its head. Children don't learn self-regulation by removing play. You tell kids, stop horsing around, don't goof off in the line, whatever. You want them to be straight little soldiers. And it's like, but does that part matter? As a teacher, I have to ask myself these things because very often my students are learning better through play. So when it was time to walk down the hallway, I went from, everybody needs to be in line and standing nicely and walking quietly and keeping your hands to yourself, to smiling at them and going, okay, all right, friends, remember, we are the nap group. We don't have to take a nap. We get to do things during nap time. But the rest of the school has nap time. And we have to be kind and considerate. We don't want to wake people up. So, I need you to be the quietest ninja mice the school has ever seen. I need the tiptoeiest little feet. We're going to sneak through the hallway to the motor room, and if we're really, really quiet, I don't think anybody will notice us. And they all start giggling. And other teachers would play along because I would say it loud enough for the other teachers walking by to hear and be like, oh, I don't see anybody. Oh my goodness. Wow. Oh, wow. Are these ninja mice walking in the hallway? I almost stepped on you. And they would be quiet and they would participate. Or one kid would be like, can I be a ninja unicorn instead of a mouse? And I'd be like, all right, but you can't poke anybody with your unicorn horn. Okay. So you got to be careful. And it was effective, right? And then there are days where the kids are just rowdy, okay? They're 3 to 5-year-olds. Expecting perfection at any given time is just flat out insanity, and good luck. But when I realized my kids had big body movement needs, and maybe we were trapped inside, it was rainy, and they didn't get to go on the playground, and they're just anxious to get to the motor room, and they're all just climbing over each other. I'm just like, all right, you guys, I need you to do something different. We're not ninja mice today. I need you to be giant ninja elephants. And they would just look at me like, lady, you're crazy. And they would start giggling. And I said, okay, do elephants take tiny little steps? No. Okay. I need you to take your biggest elephant steps. But are elephant steps, do you think they're really quiet or really loud? And they would be like, loud? I was like, okay, well, that's a problem. We can't be ninja elephants if we're taking really loud steps, right? So I need you to take your biggest elephant steps like a ninja and be as quiet as you can. But here's the trick. You have to be silent. You also have to be really careful because not only do you have big, giant elephant feet, you have a long, swinging elephant trunk, and you don't want to hit other people with it. You don't want to knock things over, and your ninja skills have to make room for others in the hallway. Now we're not simply following directions, okay? We're building body awareness because children, believe it or not, if you've never thought about this, and I didn't think about this until I was working with my autistic son, who is 15 and has spatial awareness issues. Kids have to be taught body awareness. They don't realize how much space they occupy. And I say this laughing because they really don't. They don't also think about how to move safely from point A to point B, especially when they're excited, and how to regulate big body movement. It's also, while doing all of these things, mind you, they are also being asked to think about people next to them, in front of them, behind them, around them. That's a challenge. So the hallway isn't just a hallway anymore. It becomes another form of classroom and teaching environment, which is insane because you're like, dude, you're just supposed to get your kids from the classroom to the motor room. But here's the thing. Is it about the walking in a line, or is it about teaching all of these other things? What is more important to me? And for me, how to move safely, how to regulate our movements and consider others. Oh my gosh, this is so much better than shh, be quiet, stand in line. And I think this is where we also have to understand that every routine teaches two lessons, right? It teaches the behavior itself, and then it teaches the reason behind it. Raise your hand. Why? One voice at a time. Making room for everyone's ideas creates respectful discussion, equitable participation, and these are all wonderful goals. A little lofty and above the heads of preschoolers when you have to explain it. But then instead, think about the age that you're speaking to, right? If 3-year-old Susie starts interrupting and I go, Susie, I need you to wait your turn. And she's, I don't know, but why? And it's like, Susie, would you like it if Timmy interrupted you instead and didn't allow you to speak and say what you wanted to say that you were so excited about? No, I wouldn't like that. Well, do you think it makes Timmy feel good or bad? And then I would look at Timmy and I'd say, Timmy, how do you feel being interrupted? Not good. Susie might apologize and be like, oh, I'm sorry. And then they realize that consideration is important. I might not have been able to say that it's equitable participation and respectful discussion in such a lofty way, but I basically said, hey, respect your classmates. Think about how it make you feel, connecting it to that. But sometimes there's other things, what happens when a student, in the class is one of those impulsive thinkers. Like, I have ADHD. Sometimes I want to blurt out what's coming out of my, out of my brain, and it just, no filter, just straight out. And it's like, oh crap, I'm interrupting somebody. How do you deal with students who forget a thought? Well, one of the ways that I've personally done this to mitigate some of that is that sometimes when I know I'm going to be asking a very thoughtful question that the whole class is going to be really excited to answer, I have them answer it by drawing a picture, or we will write a sentence out and then come to the carpet after that. So sometimes that can be like, hey, take out a sticky note, write down your thought, and then we're going to share. And that can be a great way to preserve purpose while adapting the practice. You know, there are so many things that we could question about routines and lessons. Putting desks in rows, deadlines, quiet transitions, homework. None of these have automatically good or bad lessons. But the human classroom question is always, does this routine still serve the purpose it was created for? If it does, wonderful. Keep it. Do what you're doing. If it doesn't, maybe it's time to rethink the routine instead of defending it simply because it's what we've always done. Here's something to consider. Curiosity is a muscle. When children ask you, but why? They're not trying to just make your job harder. Maybe they're trying to be silly, but they're not trying to make your job harder. They're trying to make sense of the world. Why is the grass green? Sounds like a simple question. Sometimes it's an annoying question. But if you really think about it, suddenly you're talking about chlorophyll, photosynthesis, plant cells, sunlight, microscopes. One tiny question becomes an entire science lesson that lasts for weeks. Curiosity works the exact same way. Every meaningful discovery begins with someone asking why. I hope that our classrooms never become places where children just stop asking. We've lost the purpose of school if that's the case. So maybe the question was never really, why do we walk in a line? Maybe the better question is, what are we teaching when we ask people to walk in said line? Because every routine teaches something. Every expectation teaches something. Every answer to, but why, teaches something. The question isn't whether schools are teaching hidden lessons, because we are. I'm not going to lie, we are. We do. The real question is whether we're teaching lessons we hope children carry with them long after they've left our classrooms that matter beyond the scope of an education setting and into our communities and into our real workforces and our everyday lives. But here's the thing. It's not because I just want children who follow directions. I want to help raise adults who understand purpose, who think critically, who ask thoughtful questions, who know how to balance individual freedom with responsibility to community, and who understand that structure isn't the goal. People are. So, of course, thank you for spending time with me in the human classroom. And until next time, drink some water, touch some grass, go ask somebody a but why question. And remember, the best classrooms don't teach children to stop asking questions. They teach them that understanding the purpose behind our actions is how communities grow together. Next time on the Human Classroom, we're going to talk about curriculum, inquiry, and everything in between. The written lessons, the unwritten ones, and why the most meaningful learning often happens when a student asks questions you weren't planning for. Until then, keep asking why, keep making room for curiosity, and I'll see you next time.